This is the Garden Report podcast. We are talking before Game 3, or Game 4, of the NBA Finals. We are in the Back Bay in his beautiful apartment where we're feeling very classy, very comfortable. We're both dressed appropriately for the occasion. This is a number 9 USA jersey, and I walked up to him and said, "Is that Rajon Rondo? I can't remember." And I was embarrassed to find out that it was the second greatest player of all time, Michael Jordan.
Yeah, you screwed that one up, Jared.
Yeah, because obviously the greatest player of all time is J.R. Smith. And we're going to talk about J.R. Smith coming up here. Before we do, this show is brought to you by ZipRecruiter. If you go to ZipRecruiter.com/sportsfan, you're going to be able to sign up for free for the best job board on the internet. You will post your job to thousands of job boards across the internet. It's the best way to hire people. It's what we use to hire here at CLNS Media Network and the Garden Report. So sign up at ZipRecruiter.com/sportsfan. Now, there's one thing that LeBron James and the Cavaliers could use. It's somebody to help them execute at the end of the game. And I don't want to pick too much on J.R. Smith, but it is kind of the illustration of the difference between these two teams is at the end of games, Golden State pretty much doesn't make any mistakes, while that's where Cleveland kind of lost their chance to really close the gap in Game 3. And we saw JR making mistakes both on offense and defense. We saw, LeBron not being able to hit a field goal in the last, 6 minutes or so. But at the end, it came down to a reliance on ISO play. It's just something that LeBron and Kyrie both talked about in the conference finals and the finals as well, is how ISO is kind of what got them there, which I haven't heard anyone say in years during this analytics revolution. But that was something that Cleveland really relied upon in all these games, especially at the end of Game 3, and it killed them for both clock management purposes, and they weren't able to get good shots off because, believe it or not, Golden State is one of the best defensive teams of all time, and they were focusing in on specifically their best defenders like Klay Thompson, for instance. So do you think that, even whether it's revisionist history or looking ahead to Game 4, that at the end of games that there isn't much virtue in trying to go for a very simple clear-out ISO and trying to actually run sets and so forth?
Well, if we watched the finals last year, how did the Cavaliers win that series? They won it with Kyrie Irving going nuts with a couple of 40-plus point outings that made him an ISO ball hero. LeBron James isolating hero ball. It seems like that's inefficient, and it is for a majority of the players and the people in the NBA. But these guys are, some of the best one-on-one players ever. LeBron said that Kyrie was one of the best one-on-one scorers he's ever seen in league history. So, I guess if you zoom out for 2 seconds, the Golden State Warriors are the best team ever, most likely. They're in a position to go 16-0 in the playoffs. So they're better than the Cavaliers. I think they've established that, and it would be a total shock and surprise if Cleveland came back and 1-7. JR's tweet notwithstanding.
Not deleted tweet, of course.
Yes, of course.
For no reason.
So, what other strategy really is there? Kyrie was isolating in the third quarter. He had 16 points. I don't really bash him too much for that last play. I think he probably should have gone early, or he definitely should have gone earlier. That's pretty obvious now to say, but even in when we were watching it live, I was like, what is he doing? He's dribbling the ball way too much. But I do like, attacking late in the shot clock because you have to limit possessions against this Warriors team. We saw in Game 1 the shot discrepancy led to a blowout. It's tricky. There's no, I'm not as smart as Ty Lue when it comes to basketball, and he can't. I don't really blame him for not being able to figure out a strategy here. They're an unbelievable basketball team, so I don't really blame anything that Cleveland has done. I know people are criticizing LeBron for a lot of things.
Too many triple doubles, too many points.
Yeah, exactly. It's just very
much defense. Yeah.
It's really silly. I just don't know what more else he could have done. The 3-point shooting by the team has been substandard and extremely disappointing. I think that it appears they made all of their threes in the Eastern Conference Finals and they just ran out. But to shoot below 30% beyond the arc, I did not expect that to happen. And heading in, I had the Cavs in 7, in large part because I expected them to continue to shoot the ball extremely well. They have not shot the ball extremely well. Make or miss league. They're down 0-3.
No. Yeah, I hate it when we have to say make or miss league because it's true, but it's like saying it is what it is. If that were the case, there would be no purpose to this podcast or to any of these shows that we do. So we have to pretend like it's not the case. I thought this was going to be Warriors in 6 because I thought they would win Game 3. I thought Cleveland would either take one of the first two or they'd win Game 3.
Brave prediction.
And, I know, right? I was so I always try to go with something out of the ordinary, but like, what's the point at this point? It's not like my prediction mattered to anybody. So that's like my mom, I guess. What up, Mom? They almost pulled it off. I mean, it was a fraction away. There's so many different items you could point to. It's not like that Durant 3 was poorly defended. Like, he was right there. Durant just pulled up right in his eye. He's 7 feet tall. You don't really affect his shot unless you have your entire body on him, basically. So, that was a great shot. Like KYRIE's shot was a great shot in Game 7. That's what happens in the finals. But you brought up the pace thing, and the pace was relatively historic compared to the era in Game 1, especially in Game 2. The pace went over 110 for a lot of Game 2. The pace tends to slow down in like the late fourth quarter, especially in these blowout games where the lineups aren't on the floor anymore. But I was watching the pace throughout the game, and it was like over 110, and that's getting into like the pre-modern era, back when guys averaged, back when teams took 120 shots kind of pace. So that was historically fast play, and that is really to Golden State's advantage. Now, Cleveland has been a high-paced team, and the Celtics' objective in the conference finals was to slow the pace down. And the only game that they won really was the only relatively slow-paced game in that series. And Cleveland is also a high-paced team, but they're going up against something in a different octane. So it would logically make sense for them to try to slow it down. But Ty Lue made the point that that's not their game. They're not that good. They're not that good of a half-court defense team. So slowing it down a half-court game isn't necessarily in their favor. But it seems like it's the only thing that the Warriors are, I wouldn't say not good at, but less good at. Less amazing at it.
It's a tough balance here because if you're the Cavaliers, look, there's no defense to stop this team. It's impossible. Like, as soon as you accept that, which I think Ty Lue has, because Tristan Thompson's minutes are kind of indicative of that a little bit, and just the lineups that he's played, you can tell that, you're kind of punting on the defensive end and just hoping that your offense scores enough baskets to limit fast break opportunities by the Warriors, because they'll kill you in fast break situations. That's where they get a lot of their threes. That's where they get a lot of their layups and restricted area baskets. So, but like, the pace question, I've gone back and forth with it. After Game 1, I was really surprised with how they played, and I figured they would slow it down in Game 2. They've been stubborn, but with going back to what I just said, it's kind of like if your mentality is we have to be our very best at offense, then you can't necessarily, I know what I said earlier about ISO play, you can't do that for 4 quarters and be efficient with 2 players. That's not going to work against a team with Steph Curry and Kevin Durant. So what you need to do is you got to attack early in possessions when you have the opportunity, because this is just basketball one-on-one. A retreating defense is easier to score on than one that is set up in the half court. So it's tricky, and it's again, it's a riddle that probably doesn't have an answer, but I can understand why they push the ball when they do, and you just have to be perfect with it, and you can't miss layups when you have those opportunities, because they turn those immediately into baskets the other way. I think LeBron is shooting like 50% on drives. That's just
bad for him.
It's bad for him, and he's driving the ball like 16 times a game. So that's another thing. It's ridiculous. So, I don't really know what pace is the right pace here, to be honest. It's an impossible question to answer.
You probably win Coach of the Year if you're able to figure that part out, because nobody has, and maybe nobody will. I think there's a legitimate strategy that Cleveland's tried to implement. You're right about the whole idea of timing, of when to push it, when to step off the gas. I think that when they don't have their best lineup out there, when they don't have all their best scorers out there, that's when you want to go ISO with these guys. That's when you want to really try to transition, because then you're able to cover up for having the fact that Darren Williams, who was up until the finals a really key role player, who frankly wasn't even giving them as much as they were hoping for, but he has been scoreless still in the finals through 3 games, I believe, and just overall really a black hole for them. And J.R. Smith, I mean, he did have a good shooting game in Game 3, but generally was problematic for them, especially when he wasn't like the 5th scorer in the lineup at the time. But that's when I felt like they really needed to emphasize running, emphasize clear outs, stuff like that. But my issue with the Cavaliers clear outs, and especially in crunch time, is that they were more of the, kind of reminded me of the 2012 or 13 Knicks with Carmelo when they came into Boston. I mean, obviously we're Boston guys, so most of our memories are specific to that. But when that team came in and beat the Celtics,
yeah,
I thought the worst part about that loss for Boston was that most of the plays were those vintage 90s clearouts where it's just the guy going one-on-one, and it's basically just like you're at the playground watching guys clear out. And there's no movement off ball. No one's trying to, there's no one's trying to slip back door. Nobody's trying to set up a flare screen for a shooter in the corner or anything like that. It was just because I think KYRIE waved off the J.R. Smith screen on the one where he took Clay one-on-one and missed a step back, if I'm not mistaken. Might have been a different play, but it was pretty obvious. It was like, I'm going to go get mine because I'm going to put the team on my back kind of moment. And it's great if you're doing that, but you have to be setting up your bailout option when you're doing that, because the NBA, the modern NBA, one of the big things here, it's about having multiple options on every single play. And I think Cleveland overall has done a really good job with that, and they usually don't need to use it because their guys are pretty goddamn good. But in those situations, you have to have something happening off the ball. The guys can't be standing around watching, especially when everything is on the line. It's one thing if they're doing that in the third quarter. It's one thing. It's another thing when it's less than 2 minutes left in the game. I felt there were a lot of wasted opportunities where those plays could have had a reset option, because like KYRIE at a certain point, he's like dribbled his way to the opposite corner. It's like he has to take the shot. He can't get out of it anymore. But if they're running something on the other end to give him a bailout option so he can try to reset when there's 8 seconds left in the shot clock, then you still have a chance. But he's trying. I mean, he's the best ISO scorer guard pretty much.
Right, and if he made that shot, then we wouldn't be talking about
exactly, because we could have said the same thing about that last one. And we had the same thing where Game 3 or 4 in the Boston series where he had some of those unbelievable shots. Game 4, I guess.
Game 4, yeah.
Game 3 they won. But in the Game 4, there was a lot of those ISO type plays where, if he missed those shots, it would be the kind of the point that I'm making now. But I still look at those plays whether or not the ball goes in. I think there's still a lot more that you can do here. It's kind of like the same thing that Steve Kerr was saying after Game 2, where they had that incredible Game 2 win, and he was saying, if we do that in Cleveland, we're going to get our asses kicked. There's always something you can improve upon, and I'm very anal, so.
Yeah, I mean, I know the Game 4 is tonight. It's not really that interesting to me. Like, I just think the series is over.
Sure.
Like, we can get into X's and O's, yada yada. But like, what I'm more interested in is, like, this is kind of transitioning the conversation a little bit, but like, where do these two teams go from here? We know that the Warriors are just going to be the Warriors. It looks like KD is going to take less money so that they can stay above the cap and retain Andre Iguodala's bird rights, and Sean Livingston's bird rights, and pay those guys. So they're going to be back in the finals next year, one would assume. But Cleveland is really interesting because, like, should they they have very little flexibility, but at the same time they're about to potentially get swept or lose in 5 or whatever. They're not as good as the Warriors. Do they just roll it back with what they have and hope that they get a little bit of injury luck? Like, because, I mean, what would that be? LeBron's 8th, 9th, 21st straight trip to the finals. Like, his body, he's not going to be as athletic in next year's finals, assuming they get there, as he was in this year's, as he was in last year's. So I don't know what they do here. And I mean, I don't expect you to have any answers because it's an incredibly difficult question.
I've been
But
thinking about it. I mean, I think for them the big thing is trying to see if they can move JR. Like I think it starts there because they're locked in there, and I don't think he's gonna. I mean, with by the way, with obviously all due respect to the situation he's gone through with his family, I hate having to criticize guys when you're going through a personal strife that we're aware of. But what's JR? What's the commitment on JR for the next 3 years?
JR's 13.7 next
Okay.
year, 14.7 the year after that, and then a non-guarantee.
That's not okay. So there's that at least. But I mean, I think that's like the money that weighs them down right there. Where I don't think they're getting the I think that they're not getting the productivity that's worth the payment there. The good thing is they're locked in with Thompson at a pretty good rate for 2 more.
Good for who?
I mean, so that's that's a great question. So I thought up until this series, Tristan Thompson was worth well in excess of what he's being paid, and then they couldn't really use him in this series.
No, well, okay. Let me push back a little bit on that because, like, first of all, within the context of his role, like only with the Cavaliers, with Love, LeBron, Kyrie, these ridiculous players, he's great. Like,
Which is all that matters.
Which yes,
Yeah.
yes. To them, he's worth this money
Yeah.
because they need a guy who can defend as well as he can with versatility, grab those offensive rebounds, give those second opportunities, set those screens. He's great in that role.
Until the finals.
But I don't understand. Like I don't think he's being necessarily played off the floor so much as he's just playing terrible basketball. Like I don't know. I don't understand. He's just not brought it, in my opinion. Like, I'm sorry, but you need to rebound over Zaza Pachulia. You have to dominate the paint when you are the 5-man and LeBron's the 4 and they are small. You have to be more attentive on your switches on and off the ball. You have to, when they trap Kyrie Irving and you're the screener and he gives you the ball on the release valve, you can't catch it and then, take 6 seconds at the free throw line making your decision. It's like he's been just terrible. I don't know what else to say about it.
So I feel like all the things that he does really well, that he's been doing really well, that you just described, stop working in the finals. So do you think that's just him? Like, do you think it's just literally just he just for some reason couldn't get it done, or do you think there's something different the Warriors did? Because I haven't looked at the tape to figure what that is. I think Zaza is probably physically unique to all the guys he's gone against. Although I'm trying to remember back to the Raptors
Tyler
series.
Zeller, excuse me.
Oh wow, sorry Tyler. I'm trying to remember back to the Raptors series with Valanciunas, who I'd say physically is relatively similar to Zaza. Did he struggle there? I don't remember. I think I remember him having pretty much a field day there, but also he didn't have nearly the responsibilities that he had in this Golden State series. I mean, for one, the switches were just I think that was the biggest issue. For Thompson, who's one of the best at that in the league, it just didn't work for him this time. I thought his footwork just couldn't keep up with whomever he was getting switched onto. And
why? That's like that's the thing. It worked last year.
I think you get switched on to Kevin Durant, and it's one. And okay, so Curry has I'd say Kyrie might be the only guy off the top of my head I can think is better at this right now. But there's one thing Curry's masterful at is that if he can catch people whose feet are slower than him in a one-on-one situation, he's going to keep doing dribble moves until their ankles are completely sideways, and then he's able to get out and get his open look. And I don't think Thompson has gone up against someone that could do it quite like that. But then it's like if you get switched on to Kevin Durant, it's like there's no advantage you can play against him. Like,
well, sure, Kevin Durant is unguardable.
He's good.
And he wasn't there last year. I agree with that.
So I think Thompson's facing guys that are completely unlike who he's faced before that we've seen him have success against. And I mean, I think if there's anyone that I would say I could never imagine him not bringing it mentally and physically, Thompson is definitely towards the top of that list. I think it's that he just simply wasn't prepared for what he was going to see this time around, even considering what he saw last year.
Maybe. Like, I don't know if I necessarily buy all that. We can't see whoever is watching this cannot see, but we are watching a replay of Game 2, and Thompson just
He just hit a shot,
had
right?
like his first 2 points of the series. I don't know. Everything I just said about the success that he's had in the past, it's not happening right now. He has 11 rebounds in this series. Kyrie Irving has 11 rebounds. Like it's. I don't know, man. Like,
Well, I think the big thing on that, just even watching the tape we're seeing right now, a big thing is that one, Thompson, when he's defending against Golden State, he usually is running from the 3-point line to try to go get on the glass. So it's not, he doesn't get the box out very often, which is because his whole thing is that he's able to seek his box out target as soon as the ball goes up, and he's working on him the entire time the ball's in the air. That's how he wins most of those rebounds. I mean, we saw in the Boston series, he would be defending out on the perimeter, and he would have Horford there, and he would just get an elbow into Horford's ribs as soon as the shot went up, and he would run all the way to the hoop, getting around him. So I don't think he's had the opportunity to do that nearly as much against Golden State. But another thing is, you're just seeing that play where they run a side pick and roll with Draymond and Curry. Then Curry whips the pass over to Draymond on the near post, and then Zaza floods the lane, and they quickly kick it back over to Zaza running down the lane. Curry is able to throw those passes over that trap. And that's something that Isaiah wasn't able to do in the round before that, and then Kojo wasn't really doing because he wasn't really equipped to handle as much. But I think Thompson had so much success showing high on pick and rolls in the previous series leading up to the finals. But then going up against Draymond and Curry, it's like it just doesn't work because those guys are too good.
yeah, I mean, sure. He had success last year, and I think you switch a lot of that action anyway. But yeah, we're paying a lot of attention to Tristan Thompson, and
That's what I do.
Yeah,
That's how we have fun.
like
move it along.
But okay, so I guess another question that is kind of a big talking point right now is just like, is this good for the NBA? Competitive balance? What are your general thoughts there? Like, I wrote a story that went up earlier today, and I talked to Danny Ainge for it, and he said basically that no one in the world can answer the question, is competitive balance good, or should I say better than a dominant dynasty, which is more appealing to fans, which is better for the growth of the league, better for the popularity of the league. So where do you stand on that, and how exciting is it to watch the Golden State Warriors go 16-0 for the next 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm someone that wants the most painfully tight 7-game series every single series.
Like last year is a series we will always remember.
Yeah, I think last year is probably one of my 5 favorite finals that I've seen in my lifetime that I can just think off the top of my head.
Probably.
Or is it probably my favorite that I can think of? So for one, I think that great dynasties and great iconic players are the best thing for the league. I absolutely think that, but it has to be the right dynasty, because the Spurs dynasty, which for me and I assume for you as well, is probably one of the things you love most about the history of the NBA. And from an overall business perspective and a global popularity perspective, it wasn't as favorable when those guys are winning because they don't have the global pull. This Warriors team is as popular as the '96 Bulls, as the Michael Jordan Bulls. I mean, they are globally iconic. And I mean, I was in the Hall of Fame the other day, and they have a rack of balls for with different teams on them. Mm-hmm. Then there's just a rack of just Steph Curry balls. Steph is the face of the league. He is as much as LeBron right now. There was no LeBron rack, at least maybe there should have been. But but people love Steph. They love Durant. They love this team. They're an aesthetically pleasing team. Their jersey colors are aesthetically pleasing. The location is pleasing. They're a brand that I think elevates the league. And I think the league is number one. I think at this point, I think the commissioner's office is more concerned about their global exposure and global reputation. all the teams across the league are obviously concerned about competitive balance. So I think the league is happy about the fact that the Warriors are so beloved on a global scale. The league is very unhappy about how uncompetitive these series have been, because while they know the finals ratings are historically great right now, there's going to be a reverberation across the league next year if there's a perceived lack of competition.
No, I mean, seriously, like, I think a big part of the ratings being so high, obviously, is that it's an unprecedented trilogy. If you take LeBron out of this equation, what are the ratings? Because, like...
Good, but not... obviously.
No, I mean, first of all, if the Warriors are in the finals next year against, let's say the Raptors or the Celtics, like, those ratings are nosediving, in my opinion, because everybody knows what's going to happen.
But I think they're nosediving because it's not LeBron and Kyrie. Because I think coming into this series,
those are the two of the most popular players, especially among young people.
Like 205,
in the league.
In the world. Yeah.
So, like, and I don't know, like, what is the intrigue next year if the Cavaliers roll it back? I don't know how much better their defense can be. Like, I expect their defense to be not great next season. I don't expect them to improve in any... their offense was unprecedented heading into this series. I don't expect them to average 1.2 points per possession through the first 3 rounds next year. So let's say they get to the finals next year with basically the same group. They don't trade Love. They don't trade Kyrie. Like, what is the intrigue there? Like, unless Durant sprains his ankle, like, what is the intrigue? Why should a casual fan tune in?
Maybe like Kevin Love will sign someone on Reddit's toaster, and then he'll have this historic hot streak. I mean, so damn, that's the last thing you said. Why would anyone tune in? So like, I mean, I'm trying to like take off my NBA journalist goggles here and put on my casual fan goggles, which I'm trying to find in my desk right now, and I think the ratings would be like cut by like 25-30%. Which, who gives a shit about ratings? The amount of thrill surrounding it, and the amount of hype, and the amount of excitement, and the fact that I have people that are hitting me up about this that never really did before because they're so excited about it, because I walk down the street in fucking Boston, and hear people talking about it where, like, I never really heard anyone talking about non-Celtics. People don't even talk about the Celtics in Boston. It's like the 4th most popular team. And the fact that they're talking about this NBA Finals shows how massive this is. So, if there is...
Or could have been.
Yeah, or could have been. So, I think the perception of competition has faded away after 2 games. Or especially after the 3rd game. And then you're coming into next year, and if it's these exact same 2 teams... I'm thinking Cleveland played really... I thought they were incredible this year. I thought they were a great team, and they've been a great team coming into the finals. The Warriors are arguably the best team we've ever seen. They're right there with the other 5 teams they usually bring up, at least from the modern era. I mean, this was a team that Cleveland, I think, could have won the title in just about every other year in the last 15 years, and they just went up against an incredible team. So if the Golden State is the exact same team next year, then I agree with you. There isn't much perceived competition, which is why I think Cleveland should make a major move. Trading Kevin Love, I think, is what makes the most sense, because if you put another great glue guy between Kyrie and LeBron that has more defensive impact, then... But
again, okay, so
whatever. Like, there's no clear opportunity.
Right. Yeah. You can't guard this team. In my opinion, if you're building to beat the Warriors, like, unless you're built, even like, okay, so the best case scenario is being built like the Celtics are. The Celtics match up extremely well defensively because they don't have to switch everything on and off the ball. They have guys like Avery Bradley and Marcus Smart, some of the best individual perimeter versatile defenders in the league. That being said, Celtics can't guard the Warriors well enough to beat them 4 times in 7 games. Like, it's just not possible because of Durant's like unprecedented size and shooting ability. So if I'm building a team to beat the Warriors, like, I'm only thinking offense. And Kevin Love could have played a little bit better offensively in Game 3. I think he was fantastic on the offensive glass.
Yeah, he's been great.
I think he played really well defensively. regardless, not even relative to his expectations or what he did last year. Like, so I don't know if he's your scapegoat.
It's not that he's a scapegoat at all. It's just like, who's the guy of these three that we can move, that we think we can build, that we can become better off of if we're able to get someone else.
Right, but I don't know if you, how are you, like, what is out there that can make you better, like, at that price point, on that contract that is really valuable. Like, I think
Anthony Davis is the only player that could ever possibly be traded that I think could possibly make Cleveland good enough to win. And that they have no capability to acquire him. So,
like, the most popular dude everyone's talking about is Paul George, but like, well, if Paul George was on this team, I do think they would be better for sure.
I agree.
But I don't see that as a very realistic trade for Cleveland, because, like, if the rumors, like, Paul George doesn't want to be potentially the second or third best player on his own team. That's just not. Clearly, if his mind is on going to the Los Angeles Lakers, winning a championship, just, it doesn't feel to me like that is what he wants to do right now, that's his right. That's perfectly fine.
But we could have said the exact same thing about Durant last year, too. Different circumstance, obviously, but I feel like they're kind of at similar points in their career, or where Durant was last year, similar to where George is this year.
Right, but all Durant's public statements were, I want to stay in Oklahoma City, until he didn't. So it's, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what you do if you're Cleveland, but I guess so. Yeah, we have no answers here. So
there are no answers.
Well, I know you wanted to talk about Mr. Gordon Hayward. Should we do that now?
I was gonna find a cool segue for that, but whatever. Let's just jump over to the Celtics side of things. We've given up on the NBA now. So Gordon Hayward's a good basketball player. If he joins the Celtics, which probably will be at a little bit of a cut rate, but probably not enough of a cut rate that it would really make a difference financially. I guess the first question is, assuming this Cleveland team stays in place and is relatively the same next year, performance-wise, what we just saw, do you think just drafting Fultz and signing Hayward makes the Celtics good enough to compete with them next year and have a chance to get to the finals?
Compete, yes. I would not pick them to win, even though there are other factors that, it's like we got to look at who exactly the Celtics have to give up to clear max space, because if it's Avery Bradley, that's a big, he was a huge player for them.
Let's say it's just Harry Rozier, because that was the math that I had that I also seen from Ryan Bernardoni at Celtics Hub earlier, although I think he did correct his math. But let's say it's basically just Rozier, Demetrius Jackson, Jordan McGee, dashing out Busele.
Also, the cap, also, we should say, we don't know what the salary cap is going to be.
It could go up $1 million or $2 million, which would save.
It will more likely go down because this is going to be a sweep. So if we look at last year's projections were $89 million. It ended at 94.1, and a big part of that was, not all of it, but a part of that was the fact that the finals went 7. We had the Western Conference Finals and the Eastern Conference Finals go 6, and that really ups the revenue for the league. So I think it will go down, unfortunately, which could make, we don't know yet, could mean that Bradley is expendable or Smart, and that's tricky. But to get back to like the fundamental issue here, I think the Celtics will be better, obviously, with Hayward, even if they have to give up Bradley. With Fultz, I think Jaylen Brown will take another step. He'll improve. If they have Marcus Smart, I think he'll improve a little bit. I'm still stubbornly optimistic about his shooting. I'm not optimistic about his explosion around the rim, which is really disappointing and troublesome. But I don't know if you can beat Cleveland. We'll see if maybe this is finally the year where all these minutes LeBron has played catches up to him. He'll be 33 years old.
He kind of admitted that it did after Game 3 to Shams Charania at the vertical. saying that he was exhausted.
Yeah, that's
Which,
it's
like,
not
obviously
rocket
he is,
science.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Played 46 minutes and was a +7.
it's not the same as last year.
No, it's completely different. So I think they can be competitive. I think they would be clearly, they just had the 1 seed, but they were the second best team in the conference.
They were a 53-win team.
I think they're clearly better than the Wizards and the Raptors. The Raptors have their own questions. If they bring everybody back, I still think that the Celtics would kind of separate themselves a little bit from those two teams if they get Hayward. But like, bottom line is, it doesn't matter. Like, these are no-brainer decisions. You do them if you can.
Okay. So you have no concerns about basically committing your long-term, or at least your 3 to 4 year window, to a team that you're not confident could even get to the NBA Finals?
Well, I mean, a lot can happen. A lot could happen over the next 3 years. Just because you're signing Hayward doesn't necessarily mean you're locking yourself in anything. You have Isaiah Thomas's free agency. We don't know what's going to happen there. We have LeBron James' free agency, which we could talk about a little bit more if you want to. We don't know what's happening there. If LeBron James goes to the Western Conference, all of a sudden the Boston Celtics are the clear favorite to get to the NBA Finals. Mm-hmm. Once you're in the NBA Finals, anything can happen. So, no, I mean, you still want to... Like, they're not really sacrificing anything by signing Hayward and by drafting Fultz. These are gifts. So...
oh, no, a Porsche and a Ferrari?
So, I don't see the downside in doing that. And same goes for Blake Griffin. And I wish this free agency class had a few more fish, but it's basically those two are the guys that they can target. Okay,
so I totally agree with you on all those points, which is unfortunate for our viewers. But Blake Griffin, I think, is one where we might have some disagreement. So I'm in the camp of being perpetually mortified by Blake Griffin's injury history. And there's a lot of fellow non-doctor reporters and analysts will throw out varying theories of it's not don't worry about his injuries because it's not like a repetitive injury to the same thing. And then the other side is the frequency of injuries, regardless of the cause, is indicative of whatever it is, whether it's a musculoskeletal, whatever the way to say that is, issue, or the way he plays, or the way he carries himself, whatever it is. There's a clear track record, no matter how many people in his entourage that he tries to beat the shit out of in Toronto. There is a track record of Blake Griffin not being able to play in the playoffs due to injury, and generally not playing more than 65 games. Him turning 29 this year, 28 or 29, forget which one. I think he's 28 now, right?
He's 28. He just turned 28.
Okay, so entering into age 28, where he's now in his prime. Prime is generally 27 to 30, and he's a player that I don't know if I would say that he has necessarily lost athleticism, or that I feel like he...
No, you can say he's lost athleticism.
So he's lost athleticism, and that I don't know, because I don't watch him, you probably watch him more than I do, I don't know if that is a matter of that he just hasn't been fresh off of injury long enough for him to really get everything back, or if he just generally doesn't have the same bounce that he had earlier in his career. Most of these guys start to lose their bounce around 28 or 29. The great players are able to reinvent their games in order to accommodate for that. I think he has done a really good job at that, but there's still some limitations that I see out on the perimeter that make me worried that once he hits age 29 and age 30, that his productivity level is going to go down. He's going to struggle to find his own shot, is going to struggle to be the playmaker that he is right now. And then, of course, if he's only playing 65 games a year, then that makes it even more of a concern. So the point of what I'm saying is I worry about committing a 4-year deal to Blake Griffin. I'd be pretty comfortable committing a 3-year max with a team option at the end, or a non-guarantee at the end. I'm pretty sure Blake Griffin has enough leverage in the market that he doesn't have to settle for that. Danny Ainge has done a pretty damn good job so far of being able to get favorable contracts for the team.
Okay, so would you rather have Blake Griffin 4-year max, player option on the 4th year, or have nobody? I shouldn't say nobody. Would you rather use your cap space to sign JaMychal Green?
No, I'd rather sign Griffin because Green's going to get a 3-year, 16, maybe 12 to 15 in that range.
Let's say hypothetically.
So
Okay.
I'm committing another good role player to go from Green to
Uh,
Griffin.
I'm using Green as an example where hypothetically
Well, they should sign Michael Green if they don't sign anyone else. So, yeah.
Right, no, yeah, but I'm using I should say some player who you can stack the money, short-term deal, so you retain as much of your flexibility as possible, and someone who's serviceable, not great, like age of Michael Green. I know that he'll get most likely get a long-term deal this summer, but what would you rather have? What is the difference here for you? Would you rather have Griffin on the 4 years, or would you rather have player X / JaMychal Green for 1 year and try to win the championship with that?
That's a good question. I'm trying to think who. I don't think there's anyone coming up in 2019 that I think would be realistically attainable off the top of my head, besides Kevin Durant, of course. Just kidding. That.
You mean 2018?
Yeah, I'm sorry, 2018, 19, whatever. But yeah, I don't think there's anyone coming up that because 4 years, assuming Griffin plays in those 4 years, I mean they just signed Horford, who they know could start tailing off after the second year of his contract based on his age. So they were pretty happy to do that with him. Doing that with Griffin, I don't think is that different of a proposition. So I think at the end of the day, I'm fine giving a 4-year max to Blake Griffin, but I'd like to try to maneuver out of the fully maxed out top of the market contract if you can. But I don't see it as if you can't get Hayward, then Griffin is obviously clearly an even consolation there. I don't think there's any risk with signing Gordon Hayward. He is pure upside, pure flexibility, can fit in your system however you want to do it. If you put Blake Griffin and Al Horford together, I think there's a lot of, I don't know if there's much offensive concern, but defensive concern. I think there's a lot of, I'm not sure how Blake Griffin will play defensively without DeAndre Jordan behind him.
Yeah, I think that, well, first of all, like, how much better of a defender is DeAndre Jordan, not talking defensive rebounding, how much better of a defender is DeAndre Jordan from Al Horford? I would say it's marginal, to be honest with you.
I think it's that they're totally different defenders.
They
play in different parts of, like,
right.
Griffin's flexibility in screwing up on switches and zoning up on the PNR is usually covered up by the fact that DeAndre's behind him to cover it up, while this Celtics defense is completely different.
Right, but I'm also looking at it as more of how would they match up, because if you're making this decision, all you need to worry about is less will we be better and can we win a championship. So who are we matching up with? We are matching up with the Cavaliers. When they go small, do you have the foot speed on the perimeter to make these switches? And, I mean, I personally think that Griffin has made strides defensively, especially in space. He's gotten smarter. He's already really good on the ball. He can switch ball screens, and that's very easy to pay attention to. He can do that, stay in front of his man, does a pretty good job with that. So I'm not really too worried there. I also think offensively, we talked a little bit earlier about his struggles regarding athleticism and the decline there. I'm not really that worried about it just because, he's made quiet improvements with his jump shot. He's attempting more and more threes. I think we'll see in Brad Stevens' system, we'll see more threes out of him. We'll see,
He'll be doubling the amount of threes he's taking.
And just playing in a different offense where it's a little bit more egalitarian without a Chris Paul. It's a lot more moving off the ball. It's a lot more, the usage of his teammates will be higher as opposed to being dependent to be that second or first fiddle with Paul. So I think that lessens the pressure a little bit on him, especially as we go forward. As Fultz improves and becomes a reliable ball handler. I'm not really I just think these are no-brainers because if you don't get a player like Griffin now, you don't really you won't have cap space and you won't have the option later. Sure, he could suffer an injury that makes that an anchor, makes that contract an anchor. But that's like what this is. If you're this close to winning the championship or getting to the finals, you do it.
I hate agreeing with people on air. It's no fun. You know, like, okay, as far as the injury thing, if whoever he's signing with, assuming he's a free, I can't remember if he's opted yet.
He has a player option, but he's gonna opt out.
So he's gonna, yeah. So when it's official, they're gonna do an exhaustive physical with him. I think they're gonna have pretty clear medical confidence when they ink him to that contract. So I'm pretty sure if a team is signing him, they're gonna have confidence that he's gonna play out the life of that contract to the best of the ability that they can be confident in that, obviously.
And also, if it doesn't work out based on performance, trading Blake Griffin with a year left on his deal or 2 years, 1 year in a player option, like, that's not hard, even if it's a max. Yeah. So, I mean, I think people forget a lot about, like, how, like, trades work and how you can just trade guys that aren't working out. I know it's not ideal, but it is possible, and he would have value somewhere for, the fact that he is a name brand. So I don't really think moving off that contract, if worst came to worst, would be that much of an issue.
Well, Orlando will always exist.
That's true.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think, is there anything else? I guess the only other question I would have, I feel like Hayward, we don't even need to break down how he could be utilized. But for Griffin, in the Celtics offense, you kind of touched on how it could change. Do you think they would use him similar to how they use Horford right now? Where he's kind of like, he's like the quaffle out there, I would say. He's just out there making contact, running off of ball screens. They're setting up flares for him to get three-point looks, and then he can obviously dribble off of that if he wants to be a playmaker.
Yeah, I think you'll see maybe them use him actually a little bit how they use Kelly Olynyk, to be honest. And then also, so he'll be, as he's been used now, he'll be a guy who can pick and pop, a guy who can roll, a guy who can run pick and rolls, which is very, that's a rare weapon that you can utilize him with, where Isaiah or Fultz or Jalen sets the screen, and then or Horford, which is a 4-5 with them, would be very awesome. Scary either way. So there's that. I still think that he's one of the better post scorers in the league, and they would drop the ball down to him. Split cut action off of that would be really interesting.
You can use him the way they use Marcus even right now.
Sure, yeah. Someone who can draw doubles, draw the defense's attention. Brad Stevens says all the time that the number one priority of his offensive schemes is to get a layup. Blake Griffin's really good when his back's to the basket or when he's facing up from 10 feet at getting layups. That's something he's really still good at. So, yeah, they'd use him in those ways. They'd give him the freedom, I think, even more than he's had in Los Angeles to grab a defensive rebound and go right away. I don't think there would be any hesitation where there is now, where it's like, okay, we got to set up the half court action, we got an outlet to Chris Paul.
Chris eats his ball.
So there's not, Isaiah Thomas isn't that type of player. So that's a huge advantage, I think. His ability to attack backpedaling defenses would only make him even more efficient and make the Celtics that much harder to guard. So there are injury-related concerns for sure, but I personally don't see a downside, and they should be thrilled if they could get him.
All right, well, the road to Banner 18 continues through Blake Griffin. That'll be interesting. Anyone else that you think could be on the market besides, Michael Green, I think would be a great filler for Amir Johnson, but we don't really need to dive into that. Is there anyone else that you think would be substantial on the market that you could see them using their cap space on if they can't get Hayward or Griffin?
That is a really good question.
I'll delay while you Google the list because it is a tricky one off the top of my head. I'll just throw out Gallinari's name out there if Gallinari's available.
Sure, I think he's going to be... I think his market will probably make it so that doesn't make too much sense for the Celtics. But
you see him in the mid to high 20s?
Potentially. That's another guy who has injury concerns.
Same concerns as Griffin. Yeah.
And he's a worse defender than Blake Griffin. In my opinion, he's just basically like, I don't know how hot takey I want to get here, but like he's just kind of a rich man's version of Olynyk. I don't know.
Is there any extinguisher over there?
So yeah, I don't know there.
See, I think of him more of like a taller Hayward than a rich man's. Well, I guess I could see how. Yeah, whatever. It's all the same thing.
Yeah. I guess there's your PJ Tuckers of the world. You can always have another 3-and-D guy if they in this scenario they don't have Hayward. You're saying, yeah. Adding wing depth, that's just key. See what Kyle Korver's ability. See if someone like Rudy Gay is willing to come over for like less money. I had a thing earlier I wrote about Andre Iguodala would be perfect for the Celtics. They could probably pay more. See, the thing about the Warriors is, sure, they can retain Iguodala legally if
he wants to be retained at his price.
Well, right. So, does the team? How much money is the team willing to spend, and how much are they willing to say? Listen, great, but a 3-year deal for you, or maybe even longer than that. When we got these other guys coming up pretty soon. Klay Thompson's coming up pretty soon. He's going to get a max. Our luxury tax payment is going to just be through the roof. I know they're going to be printing money in Golden State for a while with the new stadium, but like, I don't know. In that Woj column, I don't know if you read it. It was really interesting, just because, in my opinion, it kind of looked like they were. I don't know. I wouldn't say that they were throwing Iguodala under the bus, but they were. Woj was very blasé about Durant's willingness last summer to take less money to go to Golden State, and all they would have to do is trade Iguodala's salary, assuming that the cap did not spike. And it's like all they had to do was 2015 Finals MVP and a huge defensive presence in the series against the Cavaliers. Like, he's huge for them. He's a big part of their identity. So
it's like saying all I have to do to get these shoes to fit is to cut off my pinky toe.
Right, sure. So like, I don't think that was an open shut case there. That would have been a very big deal that could have even reduced the desirability of going to Golden State without a player like Iguodala to guard LeBron, so that Durant doesn't have to for 40 minutes. So,
which Durant proved he probably could pull off anyway.
Potentially, yeah, he's been terrific.
He's your Finals MVP, I assume.
Yes.
I thought we could debate it, but I'm like, nah.
It's either him or well, okay.
Curry would win it most years the way he's performing, but I mean Durant's been.
It's either Durant, Curry, or LeBron, and LeBron's not going.
No, LeBron. Yeah, this isn't 2015.
No, I think he's been outplayed by Durant. Yeah. To be honest,
Durant and Curry both clearly. In 2015, there was nobody that clearly was standing out, so it made sense for LeBron. But like Durant has been godly, and Curry's been sitting on that cloud right next to him. I mean, this has been insane. But yeah, okay, so. There's dispensability. Iguodala, also he's aging quickly. I mean, no one seemed to talk about it coming into the series, or I feel like most people weren't talking about all the previous stuff, that like Iguodala was hurt in that Spurs series, and it wasn't clear how healthy he was going to be for the finals. And I think he's been tremendous. Tremendous, too strong a word. He's been really good. He's been exactly what they needed out of him.
He's been terrific.
He's done everything defensively for them. He's been really good in transition. I mean, I know he's missed a lot of good 3 looks, stuff like that, but I think overall he's been pretty much everything that they could have wanted out of him.
No, I mean, you're going to leave him open. That's your defensive strategy against this team. But, no, he's been great. His defense has been terrific. Like, LeBron hasn't really wanted or been interested in posting him up at all in this series. We all know about him slapping away that corner 3 that could have made Game 3 a lot more interesting at the end there. He's just a really good player, and he's been, he's flashed the athleticism too. He's gotten up for some really impressive dunks in transition. So, yeah, he's been great.
Yeah, he's one of those aging athletes where he just has to save it for a few times a game where he really needs it.
Right, and he comes off the bench. He plays. He doesn't need to play heavy minutes. Doesn't need to cross the 35-minute barrier. Like, he's in a great situation. So
he's better than your favorite player, Patrick McCaw, is what you're saying.
he's a little bit better than Patrick McCaw, yeah.
So is there anything else you want to hit on in either of these subjects before we wrap it up here? And I have one more question for you before we do.
No, I'm good.
Okay, so I want to give out an award here.
Okay.
And I don't believe in doing just regular season awards. I find it ironic that the NBA is now putting out their awards after the finals, but they're still just regular season awards. So I always, at the end after the finals, like to do a full season award where you're rewarding for playoff performance and regular season performance, because there's this weird habit we get into in American sports where we have the playoffs, but all of our awards and all of our stats are all just regular season stats, and we just don't really talk much about what happens in the playoffs except for who wins the finals. So who would be your MVP for the NBA when you factor in the entire playoffs and regular season combined?
LeBron James.
Okay. Agreed. Yeah. Would it be... So I agree it'd be LeBron. Would Kevin Durant be number 2 for you?
I still think he's missed some time. I would probably say Kawhi would be number 2. I mean, they're up 25 points. He sprains his ankle. They lose and they get swept, and it wasn't competitive.
You didn't get a chance to really.
And we'll never know how competitive it could have been had he been healthy. I mean, he's a monster. So yeah, I'd probably put him number 2. James Harden's last game of the year, really, if we had that factored in, I mean, that would not be fair to him.
You can't wait. I mean, it gets more weight because it's that game, but you can't let it taint everything else he was doing.
No, it doesn't taint everything, but it does matter. Like, we can't. It's a home game 6 to go to the conference final. Like, it just matters to play that bad. So he would probably be 3 for me, and we should mention and. I mean,
have to.
It's all. We're splitting hairs here. My 4th would probably be. Actually, my 4th. That's really interesting. I would either have Curry or Isaiah Thomas. If we're factoring in the playoffs.
Wow.
I don't know.
Do you want me to take your goggles off for you, or
no? I mean, I don't know how you don't look at what he did in the playoffs and look at how the success of the team. Look at
we talk about the on-off value kind of thing.
No, but also
theory game 3 aside, I can totally see the argument there. But you haven't said Durant yet, which is what's shocking to me.
Well, okay, I'm sorry. Durant's interesting because so he missed 2 games in the playoffs with a calf injury or something against the Blazers. Warriors won those games by a combined 35 points. He missed 20-something games during the regular season. They rolled. He's phenomenal, but if we're using the word value here, I don't think it's his choice. He'll win a title. He'll win a Finals MVP. He's doing all the right things. But his value, like the Warriors can still win a title without Kevin Durant. So as wonderful as he is, and the fact that he could be the best player in the world as early as next season, I think, if we're basing your award on this season strictly and these playoffs, they haven't really needed him. So I would just say because of Curry's the time that he's actually been available, I would say he's been more valuable, and the on-off numbers really factor that in. I have one more stat for you off the top of my head. In the playoffs, when Durant has been on the floor without Curry, the Warriors have been outscored by 6.7 points per 100 possessions. So that number is probably wrong because I use it off the top of my head, but it's around there, and that's an absurd statistic because you would assume that the Warriors, with how they've dominated, would continue to dominate even without Curry on the floor. They had Durant, and they haven't. So it's very interesting.
All right, as you can tell, there was some technical difficulty, but whatever, we're going to wrap it up here. So for this wonderful guy over here, Michael Pina on Twitter, you can read all of his amazing content at Weiss Sports, including a new piece that just dropped Friday morning, including some quotes from Danny Ainge. Everything Danny Ainge says is gold and moves the market like the Fed chairman. So I'm sure whatever is in that piece is going to change our lives as we know it. You can find me at Jared Weiss, MBA on Twitter and Instagram. I am over at CLNS Media Network and Celtics blog. And you can find this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, wherever else you can find podcasts via the CLNS Media Network. And of course, we're putting a webcam version of this up on the CLNS YouTube channel. So go there and subscribe. You can find the Garden Report postgame show. We'll have another Garden Report coming for the draft, which is only a few weeks away. And enjoy Game 4 of the finals tonight. Please like, subscribe, all that other stuff, blah, blah, blah. It actually helps us. So thank you, and we'll see you next time on the Garden Report.